Hey there, I'm Jarod Neece, Senior Film Programmer at South by Southwest. Thanks for watching Cursed Films here on Prime Video Presents, the South by Southwest 2020 Film Festival Collection. And I'm here with the filmmakers of Cursed Films, Cheel and Brian Robertson. Thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Thanks,
well,
Jared.
I think we have a captive audience here for you. Everyone is, checking out everybody's home offices.
Yeah.
You guys have some great, the horror community always comes out with cool posters. It kind of depends on who you're interviewing and what kind of backgrounds everybody has.
Total pandering. I just hung them up right before this.
Oh,
so.
good. Well, great work. Well, cool. Yeah. So, Cursed Films. Yeah. The two of the episodes are up on Amazon, on Prime Video, and let's just a little bit. How about how the project gets started? Whose idea was it? Either of you can go.
Well, the idea came from Shudder.
Right.
So they had a sort of a basic pitch of a show about cursed film productions. And Owen Shiflett, who was with Shudder at the time, who I've been friends with for quite a while, brought it to me, thinking that it would be something that I'd be interested in because I'm a huge horror fan, and also just based on some of my previous documentary work. And so they brought me the concept, and I pitched it back to them with this idea of approaching it from, I guess, more of a skeptical perspective, looking at how the cursed stories could kind of work as a starting point for bigger conversations about why we're so interested in these stories, and why I guess how horror films can kind of prime even skeptical thinkers into this sort of supernatural thinking. I mean, I've watched The Exorcist, and I'm, at the very least agnostic, and it still terrifies me. So I wanted to explore that a little bit, and it kind of just went from there. And then once Shudder agreed that that's the approach they were interested in, me and Brian, along with a bunch of great people. Brian, you can list you were at First Love Films.
That's
with
right.
Some folks.
Yeah, no, First Love is made up of Andrew Nicholas McCann Smith and Laura Perlmutter. They were approached by Shudder and Jay, and they folded me into the project and introduced me to Jay. It was the first time I had met Jay. And we sort of all collectively came together and started working off of the original concept, which at that time was sort of a 3-episode structure, looking at a couple films per episode.
And so how did you end up with the final 5 projects? Were they the most cursed films?
It was, I think part of it was that that they are the most cursed. They're obviously they're the films that are kind of the most talked about in terms of cursed and troubled productions. And a lot of them are films that are important to me personally, and I think that Shudder felt that they were titles that would resonate with their audience. And so once we went out and did that first block of shooting and realized that there were some really interesting stories connected to these films, and not only that, but we were able to talk to interview subjects that were very open and honest about their thoughts on the idea of these films having been cursed. So after the first block of shooting, it was everyone agreed that we should expand on the concept. So that's where it kind of went from 3 episodes with 2 films each to 5 episodes focusing on a single film per episode. And I think it's definitely a format that was better for the show, because I think even now it feels like, you could expand beyond the half hour, but having like a 30-minute show with 15 minutes dedicated to each film it felt very rushed. So we were happy to land on the current format.
And what do you think that line is between troubled and cursed? Where does it draw? Where does that line? Because there's a lot of troubled productions. You hear all kind of Don Quixote or all kind of that could be cursed too, I guess. But what is there? Was it death or what's the line?
I think part of the line is the subject matter of the film. If especially or Poltergeist is the perfect example of that, where all of these unfortunate things were connected to not only the making of the first film, but the following two. And we explore in the episode this idea that, some people think it was connected to the use of real human remains, skeletons used to shoot the first film. So the fact that kind of mirrors the plot of the first film, the idea of the Freeling family moving into this home in suburbia that happened to be built on a burial ground. And that's the thing that was the cause of them having been haunted by a poltergeist. So it kind of mirrors, the curse legend mirrors the plot of the film. And I think that gives it a little bit of power. And, you look at The Omen, and it's a film about the devil coming back in the body of a child. And that in itself, if things start happening on the set of a film that is dealing with that subject matter, it's the perfect sort of recipe for legends like this. And I think all of that is subtly nudged by the PR teams behind the films, especially in the case of The Omen.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's the subject matter and the willingness of the people involved to kind of subtly spread the stories.
Yeah, it's interesting. Are you all believers? Do you believe in these whatever paranormal or whatever you want to call it? No. Okay.
Yeah, I'm not a believer. I'm
not a believer.
It's not the fun answer, but I'll say that I am a believer in the fact that a lot of crazy stuff happens in the world, and there's a lot of unexplainable things that I would never suggest I have and all the answers to, of course. And I came out, I think, with an appreciation of that. While I'm not convinced that some of that stuff has supernatural, the explanation is supernatural. I think at the very least, looking at how especially on a production like The Omen, so many strange coincidences that aligned during that production, in combination with the fact that these legends are being shared by professional storytellers. So these are people who they make their living telling stories on the big screen. So of course they're perpetuating these myths and probably adding to them to make it a better story when they're telling it to friends at a party or whatever. So I'm equally interested in that as well. Just our inclination to sort of, invent little details and how that can kind of permanently shape a legend and make it grow and turn it into something different and new. And that's the whole series. It's that we kept saying it's the exploring the tension between the rational and irrational, and most of us exist right in the middle there. And whenever you bump too closely to either side, it's either too boring when you're bumping to the rational side, or it's too out there and esoteric and hard to kind of wrap your head around if you're too close to the irrational side. So we wanted to look at the series from that kind of middle ground.
And did you interviewed a lot of people? Obviously for the 5 films in total. Was there a story or two that you heard that maybe, walk that line between, okay, maybe this is something different, or just really scary or weird, or
Brian, did you have any that you feel you were like?
The Omen was the one, as you said, was chock full of sort of these very, very strange, sort of bizarre coincidences. But the story about the art director who got into the car accident with his wife, and the accident sort of mirroring a scene in The Omen that was quite violent, and then having stepped away from the accident and seeing a road sign that said Omen 66.6 kilometers, which I don't think is possible to verify at this point, but that's sort of the myth and that's sort of the legend, and that was definitely freaky. And Richard Donner even was sort of flabbergasted in sort of telling that story. It was definitely a strange occurrence. But yeah, I don't know, Jay, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. The Omen, all of the stuff that happened during the production of The Omen is just a lot of weird coincidences that if you did set aside the fact that it could have just been enhanced by the people telling the stories, just on its face, it's just a good number of weird happenings to get you thinking that something might have been off during that production.
I mean, you've definitely made me want to go back and watch these films closer and, get to see all these little details, especially, the bones from Poltergeist is so crazy. I just remember that scene so vividly as a kid. But are there do you have other films on the list of this is, if we're able to do more of these, is there any films out there that you think are good contenders?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there are definitely films that have had the reputation of being cursed, but also I think you have to, I'm interested in looking at just productions that were troubled, like looking at taking the word curse and not necessarily limiting it to the supernatural sort of side of actually cursing a production, but something that was ill-fated, that just went through a series of horrible circumstances, and someone might have come out the other side saying it feels like we were cursed, even if they don't believe it themselves. I think there are a number of films that I would be interested in exploring from that perspective. And, in this one we focused on horror films. And I mean, The Crow is kind of horror adjacent, I guess, but I would be curious to look at some of the films that maybe aren't horror films specifically, and contrasting that against how, like I said earlier, I think some of the power behind these stories is the fact that they're coming from films that deal with dark subject matter and open up some strange thoughts in your mind as you're watching them. So how does that work for something like, Superman, which a lot of people think is a cursed film?
Mr. Mom, something like Don't Tell Mom the Babysitter's Dead. Who knows?
Yeah, Three Men and a Baby.
3 Men and a Baby. Like, how many babies were there? How many babies are still making that movie?
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, for sure, we would love to, if there's, interest, there are more stories to tell. For me, the main thing is making sure that behind the legend, there's an interesting story, and that we can access people who will talk about these things honestly and offer a perspective that you might not get from like an internet listicle or a YouTube video essay or something like that. So I just want to expand it a bit beyond the edges of the legend.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's great, guys. I definitely want to go watch the other 3 films over on Shudder. I know that everyone was really thrilled that you guys were able to take part in this. I want to thank Jay and Brian from Curse Films for joining us today. It was cool to hear, some behind the scenes, and hopefully we get to see more of these. They don't all have to be genre films. And then, thanks to Prime Video Presents the South by Southwest 2020 Film Festival collection. Again, go to Shudder to watch all 5 of these episodes, and the South by Southwest social media channels for ways to engage in all the films participating. Jay, Brian, thanks for coming, and great seeing you guys virtually.
Yeah, thanks, Jared.